Test prova 1, 2, 3. Mikrofonu konuş diyecektim de gerek kalmadı. Test prova 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. S. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Ey ah, ey ah, günaydın. Ey ah, günaydın. Test prova.
Ses 1 2, ses 1 2.
Test.
Good morning. We're just waiting for Shanghai, so please bear with us a few minutes. And if he doesn't show up, we will start. Huh? So because of his role as the Secretariat of the IGF, so we're just waiting for him in a specific few minutes. So I think now we're 15 past 9. Maybe it's the right time to start, and we will probably include Shanghai when he arrives. Apparently, he's busy with some dignitaries or so. So, good morning once again. Let me introduce the context of this workshop, if I may. This workshop 140 is one of the workshops organized by the Arab IGF main partners, which is the first partner I'm representing is United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, ESCWA, the League of Arab States, and our colleagues in the Arab IGF Technical Secretariat, the NTRA of Egypt, plus the AMAG, or the Arab MAG of the Arab IGF. So these are the co-organizers of this workshop. And it's one of the new practices that the Arab IGF officially designs and have an activity within the global IGF apart from the conventional reporting of in regional dialogues and so. This is one of two. The other one is on Thursday, related to emerging issues from an Arab regional perspective. So this is the first contextual or programmatic context of the event. The second thing is a substantive contextualization of what is the importance of this discussion. Is actually related to this 2014-2015 moment that is really of interest to all people working in the information society and internet governance communities, as well as people working in sustainable development at large. The post-2015, there is going to be a new sustainable development agenda for the global world that will take over the previous MDGs framework. It's going to be the SDGs. And there is an open working group on that. And most of the processes related to international cooperation is going to pour in or feed into the SDGs process. One of these feeding processes is the WSIS plus 10 that many of us have been part and parcel of it for the last 10 years. And we have attended the last WSIS plus 10 event in Geneva in June, where the community has done the self-reflection and the WSIS plus 10 two new outputs and give this input to the ECOSOC, and the ECOSOC will give it to the General Assembly. The other thing, 1 month before, which is a CSTD meeting, it took input from the IGF community and the Enhanced Cooperation Working Group and passed it to the ECOSOC, to the General Assembly. So it seems that this 12 months are the convergence of processes. And that's why we are here focusing on the IGF process per se, and how can we give some input or thoughts whether through the IGF channels or through our constituencies in our countries back home, so that in the General Assembly discussions, there are more insights towards the future prospects of the IGFs as well as the regional IGFs. So probably assessing effectiveness, strengthening it in the future, or whatsoever. So without further ado, we will get more intros during the questions. I'd like to introduce my distinguished panelists to this workshop, and I thank them for being here. And we start from the right, like 20 seconds, introducing the affiliation, the name, the affiliation, back home, and the affiliation within the internet governance ecosystem.
Qusay Shati from Kuwait Information Technology Society. We are an NGO based in Kuwait, and I am involved in the global IGF as part of civil society.
Good morning, Leonid Todorov, .ru.
My name is Wolfgang Kleinwächter. I'm a professor for Internet Policy and Regulation at the University of Aarhus in Denmark. And I'm also a member of the ICANN Board of Directors, and I'm involved in the IGF Germany and the Eurodic, the European IGF.
Good morning. My name is Makan Fai from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, which coordinates with the African Union Commission, the African IGF.
I'm Parminder Jeet Singh from an NGO based in India, and we work on the intersection of information and communication technologies and social change. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christina Arida. I work for the National Telecom Regulatory Authority in Egypt, and I also had the team that is in charge of the Arab IGF Secretariat.
Good morning. I'm Rida Gellouz. From the Tunisian ICT Association. I am member of the Tunisian MAG and a member of the Arab MAG. Thank you.
Thank you all. May I add a little bit also for to understand the team from the Arab region that Qusay, in addition to his role in the IGF globally, he's also a member of the MAG, Arab MAG, of the Arab IGF. And Reda is also a member of the MAG, of the Arab IGF. Christine is also a member of the MAG, plus a member of the Executive Bureau of the Arab IGF, which is headed by Esco and Les, myself, and Khaled Foul. So the first thing now is to introduce the set of questions, and then we will see how to move. The first group of questions is related to the global IGF. The second is going to be related to the dialectics between the global and the regional processes. And then there is a question related to other processes on like Net Mondial and things. So the first question I'd like to direct to our colleagues from outside the region, and maybe we also get more insights rather than ours. First question is related to the very delicate issue of pertaining to multi-stakeholderism, which is the so-called respective roles. And I think this is delicate, and I hope we can give very quick, sharp, and concise messages, because this is a topic of a workshop on its own. And Wolfgang and Leonid remember that there was a workshop on that before, and then we a little bit merged and joined forces. So this is very challenging. The idea of multi-stakeholderism, we all subscribe to it, we all agree to its benefits, but there is many details regarding the subgrouping of the stakeholders, the equal footing issue, and these kind of things. So I will not give now my ideas, but I'd like to hear specifically from Leonid, Wolfgang, and Parminder on this specific point regarding the nature and the structure of multi-stakeholderism as practiced globally.
Thank you. Well, I'll be very quick. I believe that since year 2005, these roles remain basically unchanged. However, we can see a greater, we can see them increasingly merging and more closely intertwined. At the same time, I believe that it also depends on the different level of government's, let's say, of government's presence in this internet governance ecosystem on the national level, because we do understand that some governments are bigger than others, and they have that primordial instinct of monopolizing the scene. So I would say that, for example, it's hard to imagine how we can judge how these roles have evolved over time. For example, if we have an academic who was called on the government and who was recruited by the government, and then he becomes a civil servant, and then it's hard to say whether he wears an academic hat or he's already a public servant, and as such he has to follow, let's say, certain prescriptions and a certain agenda dictated by the government. So my sense is that governments are still pretty much in deciding on the public policy in the area, and to bolster the infrastructure through, by means of public investment, while other roles are critical. Some other roles are critical, such as academics to assess, evaluate, and guide the community. Civil society to be that watchdog to monitor and to exercise that public oversight. I mean, public in terms of, you know, I don't know, greater community. Public oversight over the processes, and technical community being pretty much engaged in developing new tools and instruments to help implement those policies and that practice. Thank you.
Wolfgang.
Thank you very much. I think the whole concept goes back to the so-called definition, working definition of internet governance, which was produced by the working group on internet governance and accepted 100% by the Tunis agenda, which was signed by the heads of state. And insofar, Leonid is right that since 2005, when we had this definition on the table, not so much has changed, but this definition, you know, has a number of aspects. And one aspect is that it introduced the concept of the multi-stakeholder prism. I do not like the ism, but it's labeled so, and added in their respective roles. So, and the roles are defined in the Geneva Declaration. It's like a division of labor, but what we already experienced is that not everybody is happy with this defined roles in the Geneva Declaration, because the Tunis agenda went one step further and introduced in the second part of the definition an important element which is very often overseen, and this is the concept of sharing principles, programs, and decision-making procedures. And I think this is really very, very crucial, and here we have still to learn a lot and have to develop a lot of new ideas, how to share decision-making among stakeholders which have a different legal status, but has to be treated more or less on an equal footing in an understanding of equality. There is no discrimination. So what we have to develop further is a decision-making procedure where, quote unquote, nobody has the final say, but the stakeholders have to learn to work hand in hand and to come up with a result which is named in other groups, rough consensus. So, you know, the slogan of the internet, the IGF is, we do not believe in kings, presidents, and voting, we believe in running code and rough consensus. So this is not the way how intergovernmental organizations are working. So they are This is a negotiation among governments, and then it's a voting or something like that. So it means the multi-stakeholder model introduces a new governance concept, which is still in its very early stage. We need more exploration, we need more experiments. I always argue the 21st century has still 85 years to go. We are in the very early years of this new model, and the risk is that because of some deficiencies and weaknesses of the concept, this concept will be killed in the cradle. This would be very bad, because this has a lot of potential for doing things better in the future. Thank you.
Parminder.
Thank you, Ayman. I think it's very difficult to respond to the question of multi-stakeholderism because one doesn't know what multi-stakeholderism is one responding to. But the task is made a little easier by Wolfgang speaking before me, and I can respond to that particular multi-stakeholderism. The first thing about multi-stakeholderism is that we need to know what are we talking about. Are we talking about technical issues, whether all stakeholders should have an equal right in organizing this workshop? Should they have equal rights? Now, I think there's almost a deliberate confusion between what exactly is being spoken of. Technical decisions is not what we are speaking about. Organizing workshops, organizing dialogues, they're very different matters. So I am only speaking about public policy making. Now, we should cut and slice issues because public policy making is very different from technical decisions, is different from organizing dialogues like the IGF. Public policy, who should be, what are the roles? We should, before we go into what are the roles, we should recognize what public policy is. Public policy is a collective will. It represents the will of the people. Therefore, the means of representation of the will of the people are primary. Before we go to who represents and what could be the respective roles. And equally important, public policy has a coercive effect. If there is a public policy, they can force you, constrain you, enable you, which is very important because if somebody can force me not to do something or to do something, I need to be represented. And there are therefore systems made in democracies how public policies can be made, and they are not just left to the law of the jungle. That particular point is important. Now, therefore, public policies should only be made by those institutions which have a legitimate means of at least purporting to represent the people's will. Nothing is perfect, but there should be a clear set of rules, means, demonstrated methods that this is a conversion of the people's will. And right now, it is the governments. We are happy to dismantle governments. I'm happy to have a global parliament. I'm ready to talk about those kind of representational methods. But to say, and now I come to the equal footing model, that business has to be treated equally, I'll very much go back to the traditional governmental model. Or even civil society. What right I have to sit here is because I write good projects, proposals, and some people agree to those project proposals and pay me. I don't think I have the same kind of right as a legitimate representative of public will. So I can go on. Technical community has expertise. Expertise and meritocracy has no political right. It has only a right to tell and show things. So in the same way, we can talk about other rights. So it's very dangerous, extremely dangerous for somebody to say that business should be treated in the same manner in public policy decision making. Well, we all need more open spaces of public policy decision making, and internet allows us. We want more accountability, more challenging of ideas, more answers why this issue was not taken on board. We can go to the street, stop things. These are the rights of people, rights of non-institutional forms of outside the government, but then somebody has to make the policy. And that's my problem with multi-stakeholderism. What could have been a method of improving democracy is challenging democracy. And if this is the no rules area where we are going, poor people would prefer to be in the traditional means whereby they at least know whom to vote out or whom to throw out by a revolution. In multi-stakeholderism, you don't even know whom to fight against because who's oppressing you becomes so much less clearer. Thank you.
On the same notion, so as to make some benefit of cross-fertilization of ideas, before we move to the second round of questions, let's contemplate a little bit on a detected common observation that the respective roles, specifically of the policy-making machinery, which is, until now, it is the government. The governments feel a little bit, some of them, of course, not all, a little bit not comfortable with having this flat structure within the IGF dialogue, so that they don't mind equal footing in consultations on workshop preparation and these kind of things, of course. But when it comes to policy making, and this is really the challenging part, the idea of equal footing with the other stakeholders is not very comfortable for many of them. But equal footing among them, they agree to it according to the Tunis agenda. And when the definition came regarding governments, the governments on equal footing. So here there is like kind of ambiguity, constructive be it or non-constructive ambiguity, but there is an ambiguity on this kind of equal footing among subgroups or equal footing among the government subgroup. This is one thing. And the other thing, this flat structure. Now we have hundreds, thousands, and increasing number of people coming for the dialogue. Is it healthy, even from an organizational perspective, to have like 1,000 talking the same talk, then 2,000 and 4,000, without even having a subgrouping like the ICANN model? The ICANN model, they have a constituency for business, a constituency for like GAC for governments, constituency for CNSO, GNSO, and these kind of things. So this is out of the box, maybe provoking question. Do you think, Wolfgang, Leonard, and Parminder, before we move, that it is healthy in the post-2015 that the IGF continue to be flat as such, or it has a little bit of form based on subgrouping, like the one in ICANN, for example? I hope it's not very provoking. Wolfgang, Leonid, and Parminder, before we move.
You know, moving forward into new territory always needs some exploration, experience, and you have to find out what works. I think the risk is always you move from one extreme to the other extreme. So that means from traditional one stakeholder model where only governments have a final say to a model where too many people are talking to each other and it's impossible to reach anything. The truth very often is elsewhere in the middle, and we have to figure out where this middle is. Insofar, if we go to concepts which were raised by Leonid about democracy, we have the traditional representative democracy, and Parminder has referred to this, that we, with the governments on the top. And then some people say the multi-stakeholderism opens the door for the participatory democracy. So these are two concepts which are not in conflicts. It can, you know, be linked in a certain degree. So that means every broad participation with thousands of people has to lead to, in a certain moment, to a certain form of representativity. And this also brings then the legitimacy. For instance, you know, I remember in the WSIS process when civil society was rejected in the early days because they are totally disorganized, there are loudspeakers, people are making noise, to whom should we talk, and things like that. But then the civil society with its hundreds of organizations were able to create a bureau. They had a plenary, they had a number of working groups and caucuses, and a content and themes group, and though within a process within the civil society produced reasonable results, produced language, and enabled itself then to communicate with other organizations which have the same process inside their communities, including governments. Because also within governments you have a broad range of different opinions. So it's the same chaos you have in the civil society, that some governments have a totally different position than other governments. And the challenge, but also the beauty of the multi-stakeholder model is that you have to bring these various opinion-forming processes now into interconnection. And this makes it really difficult. I disagree to a certain degree with Parminder when he says, okay, this works for the technical issues, but the public policy issues should be the privilege or the monopoly of the governments. In this internet world, it's nearly impossible, or not only nearly, it is impossible to separate the technical from the policy issues. If you go to the ICANN issues, the introduction of new generic top-level domains is really a technical issue. But if you look in the debate we have within ICANN on simple 3 letters like .20, then you have immediately the political issues involved. And the same thing, public policy issues, will not find a solution if they ignore the technical realities. So that means in Germany, the parliament adopted a law for, against child pornography with filtering. It didn't work technically. So that means the next parliament abolished the law because public policy was made by ignoring the technical realities. Insofar, there is no choice than the technical people and the policy people, including the private sector and the civil society, come together and try to find a solution for concrete issues, and nobody should have the last word. Thank you.
Let me just change the discourse just a little bit. Well, I would love to mention that, I mean, the word multi-stakeholderism indeed is really ugly, I would agree. But what I think is that we sometimes, what is missing in the picture is the institutional fundamentals of the process itself. And let us just ask this question: why some governments are so much concerned of multi-stakeholderism? Why do they feel that something is, from their perspective, wrong with that? I believe that they instinctively can see and can sense the rise of a rival to them. And that rival does not lie in multi-stakeholderism and related process per se. Rather, it's all about the rise of a new, very influential and very consolidated group, which I, for myself, call internet bureaucracy. An internet bureaucracy is a very special instrument in formulating, shaping, and delivering on certain policy aspects. We do know this. We do understand that with this internet bureaucracy, while the internet is no doubt a public good, a universal public good, the internet governance process, which you asked, is increasingly becoming pretty much club good. I mean, a good for few, where the entry barrier to which are growing. Just imagine what one needs to join the process now, not 10 or 15 years ago. That person should be well versed in this internet governance language with all these acronyms and abbreviations. That person should no doubt be in good command of the English language, because without that he cannot join the process, I mean meaningfully. And that person should be educated and have funding to go for all these meetings. In other words, what I mean, the internet governance, and that I'm really concerned, is right now is usurped by a certain group, and that's why the Internet Governance Forum can grow only at the expense of that narrow group, not the at-large community. Thank you.
Okay, so until now, the first two interveners did not really touch on the idea of the flat and the little bit taking form subgrouping within the IGF post-2015, although Wolfgang said that something in the middle can be found, but maybe Parminder can focus more on the idea of flat versus non-flat.
Okay, I'll be direct to your proposal. I think that's a good idea for a number of reasons, that we allow each group to talk to each other, which fluid space would be available, but to allow to gather separately a set of constituencies, because their political legitimacy, background, conception is very different. And governments should be able to think together. Technical people should focus on certain kind of issues like Snowden revelations and what were the technical problems and what changes need to be made. And it's not only for the governments. I have a big concern about how multi-stakeholderism has corrupted, changed civil society. While civil society earlier or always, whenever they spoke, was looking back to their own constituents and saying, what I'm speaking, does it suit them? Am I going to be able to answer back to them? They are listening. So they were always thinking of them, but a certain multi-stakeholderist civil society thinks whether we are acceptable to the big business largely, and the technical community, and that kind of things change. But if civil society is organizing along with its constituencies separately, and they are talking, that I think is a good idea, really.
Okay, so before we move to the second round of questions, any further notes from the first segment of our panelists? Okay, so now we move smoothly, also gradually. Before we move to the regional dimension, we will ask our colleagues from the regional platforms, the African IGF, the Arab IGF, to comment on the first segment of questions. Maybe they have developed some also enriching insights to the first segment. And then from there, we go to the question on regional. So now the same question, but directed to Qusay, Makan, Christine, and Rida. Just insights, reflections on the first segment regarding the multi-stakeholderism, the equal footing, the respective roles, and the flat versus non-flat evolution. So 1 minute each, please, before we move. Qusay.
Multi-stakeholder is a main principle of the WSIS. And we cannot, for example, have venues like IGF without having a multi-stakeholder involvement. However, what is emerging now is the respective role of each stakeholder. And while we may agree on all stakeholders to be involved in the process, we may look at the respective role differently from the perspective of each stakeholder toward others. And this needs more debate, I guess. We all know, for example, civil society is involved in advocacy, but now if they will involve in developing public policy, so how? How the private sector and what they should do. What is the government role as a convener or as a facilitator or as a drafter of public policy? Are there other stakeholders like academic and technical committee, whether local, global, or regional? So these are all questions that is
What about the idea of evolution of the, we are for the multi-stakeholder, but evolution of the taking a little bit of more like features, like subgroupings, things like what I proposed just for sake of argument, like the ICANN constituencies. Thought about that.
And actually, your question is correct in terms of when there is a topic about public policy. For example, when we talk about digital economy and public policies related to digital economy, shall we deal with the private sector at large? No. There are small to medium scale companies, there are entrepreneurs, and there are major players, right? So the issue of subgroups or how to define a stakeholder, depending on the nature of or the issue of public policy, is correct and may be proper.
It has merits for discussion, for nothing more, at least for the moment, to be discussed further. Makan, also your reflections on this segment.
Yes, thank you, Ayman. What I would like to say is that the multi-stakeholder nature of the IGF as agreed and proposed by the working group and agreed by the head of state, I think is continuing and should continue. And here we have all the stakeholder groups intervening in each segment when they are doing policy making and at the technical level, government, private sector, civil society, all of them, I believe they should continue working. And this is reflected in the Bureau of the African IGF, where we have 5 regional conveners, which are from West Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and North Africa. And these conveners can be government, they can be civil society, they can be private sector. But in addition to the convener, we ask them to provide 3 other stakeholder groups from each sub-region. And the stakeholder group, if the convener is government, the 3 other groups can be civil society, private sector, technical community. If it is technical community, also government will be part of the other stakeholder group. And in addition, then we have the AUC, the African Union Commission, we have ECA, which I represent, and the NEPAD coordinating agency. And all those members have equal voice in the African IGF process. And the Bureau is always led by the country which has organized the last IGF, and we submit our reports to the various ministries in the countries, to the African Union Conference of Ministers of ICTs, and also to ECA. So I believe that it is a bit difficult to have separate communities in the IGF process. If we want to follow what ICANN is doing, it will be a bit difficult in the IGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, and then Reda.
Thank you, Ayman. Just for the record, I noticed that our scribers are having difficulties finding out who's talking, so now they're trying to get it right. So I'm Christine. I think maybe we should say our name at the beginning until it is easier for them. So on the issue of having a flat versus evolving into more complex or different mechanisms, I think the thing that is at stake here is rather multi-stakeholderism. And so I tend to agree more with Wolfgang that it's about interconnecting. It's not about bringing the same constituencies together. And the different stakeholder groups, they always find their ways of, and actually have their platforms where they really get together and dialogue. So if I talk about the Arab region, there is the Arab League, where governments come together and discuss public policies and discuss other issues. They even discuss technical matters. We also seen with the emergence of the IGF, and we've seen many civil society groups in the Arab region come together and have yearly meetings, online platforms. So this is there anyways. The issue of segregating is, I think, not in the best interest of multi-stakeholderism. It's more about commitment of bringing the different stakeholder groups together and having them listen to each other. And if I'd see any evolution, I'd like to see an evolution that goes more into a regional perspective. Because I think what we're lacking here is having the different regions, some regions provide meaningful participation. So I'd rather see the multi-stakeholder nature of the IGF encompass different regional groups and bring them somewhere in an evolutionary matter at the IGF. And so I like the idea of that McCain has put forward that the African IGF is doing, because it's more of, having a commitment from the different regional groups that they're bringing all stakeholders on board. So I see it more as an interconnection, as a commitment to multi-stakeholderism, rather than having different stakeholder groups come together. Thank you.
Thank you, Reda.
Thank you. As we all know, the multi-stakeholderism
No,
concept...
this is Reda for the transcribers. Reda who is speaking now.
Reda Gelouz, yes. What? I am a radar now.
Rida, not radar.
R-I-D-H-A.
Rida, R-I-D-H-A. Thank you.
Good. Multi-stakeholderism is probably a genuine concept which appeared through the WSIS preparatory process. When coming to the IGF, in practical, we have seen and noted that to some extent, when exercising the multi-stakeholder principles, most of the stakeholders were putting the question, what may I get from multi-stakeholderism, rather than what can I give and bring to multi-stakeholderism. And I think this is the highest preoccupation for the time being. That's why now, when we talk about multi-stakeholderism, we rather think about the stakeholders much more than multi-stakeholderism. For the future, I think that we should try to find a way to make it a reality. I mean, to make multi-stakeholderism as close as possible to reality. How? I wouldn't agree with my colleagues on the fact that starting from the global and regional levels may bring something. I think that from the multi-stakeholder point of view, it will not be efficient. The best way would have been to start with the national level. This is where really multi-stakeholders are. This is where we can have a real exercise of multi-stakeholderism. I for sure will have a chance to talk about the Tunisian experience from this point of view, but I think that we should start from the national level, bringing and building the regional, and then finalizing at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you, Reda. So now we move clearly to the other segment, which is the regional dimension. We have four panelists from the regional IGFs, Qusay and Christine and Reda from the Arab IGF, and Makan from the African IGF, and he gave an intro about the African IGF mechanism. First, let us give an intro about the Arab IGF, and then we ask generic questions. So maybe I can give that because of my role in the Arab IGF. The Arab IGF is actually the semi-exact replica of the global IGF mechanism. So we have the same structure of multi-stakeholder bottom-up input to the program of the meetings, similar to the global MAG. We have also a host that changes year to year, and every year we change the stakeholder group or the regional subgroup. And we have a mechanism similar to the mechanism of the UN and the technical secretariat in the UN. We have something called the Executive Bureau for Joint Coordination, which has the ESCO and the UN ESCO and the League of Arab States as the umbrella organizations, as well as the technical secretariat, which is a voluntary contribution from the NTRA. So three of us, like 3 and 1 and 1 and 3, this is the Arab IGF, like super secretariat. This is the bureau. So this is just for convening, for coordination, but the process itself is bottom up. The program, the topics, the slogan, everything is set in a bottom-up participatory fashion on equal footing, multi-stakeholder, similar to this structure of the global IGF. And we had 3 years. Now the first was in Kuwait, second in Algeria. The third will be in Beirut next November. And this is just the intro, but now we will ask about the linkages, which is the question related to this panel. The linkages between the Arab IGF and the global IGF. I will ask Christine, because this was part of her efforts among ESCO and us, but she played a major role on that, regarding the reporting and the connection between the Arab IGF and the global IGF. How do you see it, Christine? How do you see the idea of reporting? Is it enough? Do you think of something that comes also top-down, like bottom-up? You know better, and you understand what we want to bring to the table.
Okay, thank you, Ayman. This is Christina Arida. Well, that's a really difficult question, and it's a question that I mean, on an interregional dialogue that has been taking place at the IGF, we've been posing at the IGFs and even through the years, through the mailing list, how to actually make this linkage more effective and more realistic. So just to give a bit of the status quo and maybe some touch on the history, you all know that through the IGF, you can actually say that I'm running whatever national or regional IGF in my country or region, simply by making sure that you're following some simple rules that are listed on the website, and that is mainly being multi-stakeholder in nature. So you have different stakeholders that are convening this initiative, and that you're going along the same lines. So that's an easy thing. You just comply to a couple of rules. Whether you really do or not is something that you put forward. There's no way to really go back and look at it in depth and see if it's true or not, but it's there. And then you get to report on a yearly basis to the Secretariat of the IGF whatever activities you've made. But for a couple of years now, there's been a dialogue going on at the IGF where the different coordinators of the regional national initiatives come together and they exchange views. And for some time, it was just simply reporting back and learning from each other's experience. But this year, there's a new idea of actually discussing with a broader public, not just with the coordinators, of how to make this, let's say, linkage more effective. And today, actually, we are having a session at 2:30 to discuss about that, and everyone is invited. We're trying to make it a bigger group discussing. I mean, there are so many people, all of us probably are in a way or another participating or involved in some IG dialogue in their own country or in their own region. And whatever is done there, they bring it on their own personal basis into the IGF. So there is an implicit linkage that is there. But there should be some more focus on how to look at the topics that are discussed on regional and national levels when you're doing the agenda of the IGF. So, and this is one of the ideas that need to be looked at. I mean, the MAG, you all know that the MAG meets 3 times a year, and they discuss what will be the agenda of the next IGF. They open up for consultation, so everyone can go and put their view. But there is no actual mechanism to take from the national and the regional topics that are coming. So today we are going to discuss at the session of 2:30 what are the commonalities between the regions and what are the differences. And maybe we can come up with a number of topics that we can report back into the stock-taking session and say, here are where the commonalities between the different national regional initiatives are. And those are issues that have emerged here and there and should really be considered at the IGF on a global scale. Also, there are ideas to actually have some space within the consultations that happen through the year and give those spaces to the nationals and regional initiatives to come back and put forward ideas that can be taken into the agenda. One last thing, I think all of us on a regional and national level should have a platform that says not only we're discussing our own, but that's the most important, we're discussing what's more relevant to us in public policies pertaining to IG, but also what do we want to put forward on the global agenda. So this is a space that we really have to make available. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Maybe I take here a suggestion that maybe you bring it solidly forward, which is the idea of a solid representation within the global MAG. So there, we can have a recommendation for the UN. When they structure the MAG yearly, they have clear seats for the regional IGFs, regardless of any other considerations, be it observers or whatever, but at least to have a solid node for giving and taking input to the MAG. And before I go to Makan to give his input on that, I think Parminder wants to add something on that idea.
No, I can come back. I want to comment on this.
So on the same wavelength, what do you think, Makan, about the African IGF linkage with the global IGF? Yeah. How sufficient is it? And
thank you, Ayman. My name is Makan Fai from Economic Commission for Africa. First, let me indicate that the African IGF is objectives are to increase awareness and build capacity on internet governance of African users, to ensure that all stakeholders are well prepared for contribution and interaction, to put in place a coordinated African process for dealing with internet governance issues on the continent, to ensure also that the concerns of Africa are taken into account in the IGF process. Now, as Christine has said, reporting is no more allowed of what was done at the regional level and at the national level. This has stopped since last year. Of course, there is an interregional dialogue to share ideas on successes, failures, and the experiences. But at the African level, we provide input in the MAG by coming as a continent to propose our ideas when they are discussing the themes and the sub-themes. we have put in place a discussion list where we all come together, we find somebody to coordinate the ideas, and when we get it, then we'll send it to the IGF Secretariat as a continent. That is what we did this year, and that is what we'll do next year to be sure that our concerns are taken on board. And also, when we organize the African IGF meeting, the themes of the African IGF are built upon the sub-themes of the African IGF are built upon the sub-themes of the global IGF, so that we meet, discuss, and prepare. And we hold also our African IGF every year before the global IGF, so that the sub-themes are discussed at the regional continental level. Then our participants are prepared so that they can contribute in any of the sector, any of the panel of which is organized during the global IGF. Thank you.
So the linkages are there, but loose. It looks like loose. So I might suggest, if Christine and Makan agree, that this representation from the regions to the global MAG become part of the secretariat obligation, the global secretariat. For example, there are say 8 IGFs, maybe 2 persons from each regional IGF to be covered by the global secretariat for MAG meetings. Something like what we do in the regional IGFs for our constituencies. So maybe this can be like solid linkages. It becomes like part of the global team. So these liaison become more like an obligation by the global secretary to invite them. Because I know what you are referring to. You go because you can programmatically find a budget and go and think. But not every time, not every year, this is a standing allotment in the budget, maybe also in the Arab IGF and other IGFs. So if you agree to this, I'll take it to the next level, that the Secretariat covers 1 or 2 representatives from the regional IGF to global MAG meetings.
Yeah, quickly, 2 points. One was on that earlier proposal of more specialization of constituencies within the IGF. The main purpose, I understand they need to talk to each other, but my main issue has been that so much noise is created, but there is no policy making. And I want some methods where policy making agenda can be pushed. We have reached a situation where so-called multi-stakeholderism has become a mechanism of policy paralysis. And that's not what serves public interest at all. We need public policies for public interest, and that, I'm looking for those methods. And if this 4 constituency is a method, then that's why I welcome it. And as Wolfgang earlier said, that no one has the final say. Now, that serves the status quo. That serves the people who are in good places, that things remain as they are. And there is no final say, therefore there's no policy, which is a problem. And quickly on the regional IGFs, the point is longer. I think there should be some kind of a mechanism, but we should be careful what these regional and national IGFs are. I've seen whenever the regional commissions have a good role in the regional IGFs, we have a system which complements the traditional democratic system rather than supplants it. And same at the national level, where the national governments have some role, but a limited role. However, the places where these mechanisms are completely independent and sometimes antagonistic to the traditional mechanisms, and that is a new kind of, I think there's a transnational global elite, middle classes having global aspirations. I won't go into the theory of it, which are unhappy with the governments and trying to create a new transnational governance, which is a problem. And I found it in my, for example, the Asia Pacific IGF. I have recommended a lot of times that please go to the regional UN Commission and get them engaged, because that keeps a sense of balance, but that hasn't happened. And I think if we are getting such kind of a system, we need to set some kind of rules of the road and some basic clarities about what is what. Then alone we can allow representation to come in this form. Otherwise this supplants the global democratic systems, and which is a big problem then.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for commending on our efforts as UN regional commissions. Actually, ESCWA for the Arab region and ECA are mostly active in this kind of facilitation role for the regional IGFs, although our colleagues in ESCAP and ECLAC and ECE, they have more different intensity in this kind of facilitation. So this is the regional angle. Let me go a little bit deeper in the chain, supply chain, if we call it, of the policy making inputs, the national IGFs. The national IGFs is the 3rd layer in the structure, in the like the Aussie model. We go from national to regional to the global. So now let's go to the national, and we'll ask my colleague Reda, who has an experience on the national IGF in Tunis, and his relationship with us as the region IGF, which is delicate. We are asking ourselves here. The national IGF, a little bit, its relationship with the region IGF, which is us also. So we know it's not mature yet, but let us be very transparent. And then I will ask Qusay also, although there is not Kuwaiti IGF yet, but Qusay, I think he will do it soon. So maybe we get his input.
Thank you, Ayman. We can remember that, let's say, the national and regional preoccupation in the IGF process started in... okay. We may remember that the preoccupation of the national and the regional IGF started and appeared in Nairobi, although it was already in the Tunis agenda outputs. What I would say is that the exercise has been very, very difficult, with the lack of, let's say, directions given by the global IGF on the issue of building national and regional IGFs. So it started with initiatives coming from at the regional level. We have got the regional African, and I belong to both Africa and the Arab region, and I have got the experience of having African and Arab IGF, but also, especially probably in the African region, we had good, a wide number of national IGFs appearing. What we can say is that in absence of, let's say, general principles to be used when building national IGFs, each one has done his own experience in the way he understood it, first. And second, we know that the presence and the preoccupation of the different stakeholders at national level until now are not the same. I mean, and the IGF, let's say, national IGF have been built according to the willing of one of the stakeholders to have an IGF. In this case, we can note that most of the IGFs are civil society driven. As for Tunisia, we were very, very anxious to be really multi-stakeholders, and we established some rules to establish the national MAG. And we said, either we have the 4 stakeholders or we don't need an IGF. So the main and basic principle was to have the 4 stakeholders, and we have built on this idea. I can probably exchange with you on this, on the way we have done it, but it may take some time.
Okay, Reda, thank you. So the conclusion here will come to the floor after we finish this round. The idea of national IGFs is still primitive and needs some more stamina and effort. And let us move to Qusay, his ideas about a national IGF in Kuwait. And then we have the colleague Leonard from the Russian IGF, by the way. He can also add another perspective. So Qusay, please, what do you think about the national IGF?
Well, just as a general note, while the global IGF was initiated by the Tunis agenda, and we can consider this a top-down approach, the regional IGFs were initiated by a bottom-up process. It was the stakeholders or the involved community of internet governance in these regions or national or countries decided to have an IGF because they think this is an internet governance on a national or regional level have issues that is important to address. Whatever the format that took place, that may differ from different regions. Like in the Arab world, we have umbrella organizations. In other regions, it was initiated by certain stakeholders. So, but we always looked at the global IGF as a best practice. It is a practice that we follow. We may alter it a bit for our region, but we look at it always as a best practice, an example to follow, which means which reflect the success of the global IGF and its impact and influence on us. And that's a linkage by itself. And for us, even when we look at it on a national level, we will look at the global IGF, and then we'll look at the regional IGF that we belong to, and we'll follow, and we'll see the example to follow, and maybe we'll alter it a bit.
Okay, Leonid. Am I pronouncing it right? Leonid or Leonid?
Yeah, Leonid, it's okay.
Leonid, okay.
Now, just a quick comment. You know, we do Russian IGF, and there was the 5th consecutive Russian IGF now in April this year. I must say that by its existence, the Russian IGF challenged Russia's realities in all aspects, as well as some other well-established concepts. Just for you to know, we have in Russia, and in the language, we have no concept of stakeholder, we have no concept of community. There are no communities in Russia, make no mistake, no stakeholders. I mean, in that typical sense of these words. So they were special. We have, our civil society is still nascent. Our academy is not active in this area. There are no research papers, basically, in this area, credible research papers, to the best of my knowledge. Businesses are not interested in IGF process, and they do not contribute to that. Of course, we may wish to accept some help, say, from Microsoft, but it would be against our principles, because this is Russian IGF. And the country is so vast, it covers 11 time zones, that it's practically impossible to reach out to certain areas, simply because, for example, as far as the remote participation, when Moscow, for example, it's 10 o'clock in Moscow, it's already over midnight in the Far East. So, and against all these challenges, we still have our IGF, and we have more than 500 people participating in that, and we have a pretty much multi-stakeholder steering committee or organizing committee, and our debates are so fierce that some people who come over, our guests from overseas, when they come over, they are genuinely amused and amazed at the intensity of the debate. And with that, I must say that our relation to the global IGF is pretty loose. Of course, we replicate to some extent the structure. We do borrow some issues, and we, of course, try to build on that pool of speakers. You know, for Russians, because this is particularly important given that 86%, yet another challenge, 86% of Russia's population has no command of any foreign language whatsoever. Thank you.
And the umbrella or the which flag is the Russian IGF taking? Is it under the flag of the Ministry of ICT, or?
No, this is exactly that multi-stakeholder flag, basically 2 stakeholders, I must say, or 3, let's say, civil society, technical community, which is the Russian top-level domain operator, and the Ministry of Telecommunications, who are very, very supportive, I must say. And one more thing, as we have a lot of our neighbors, you know, with some of them we are at odds at the moment, but still we have a lot of our neighbors who still try to build on our successes and our experiences. So usually our IGF is also a platform for the former Soviet republics, post-Soviet states to come over, and even at the climax, or what seemed a climax of that very tense relationship with Ukraine. Even at that time in April, Ukrainians did come to Moscow to participate in our IGF. So I would say 7 to 10 post-Soviet states are usually present at our IGF, and we try to give them floor to discuss their own challenges, to find some commonalities, to identify peculiarities and way to tackle them.
So let me be a little bit also democratic. We started 15 minutes late, so instead of finishing at 10:30, we'll finish at 10:45. Do you agree to that, or do you want us to wrap up because there is two small rounds, one round on the other processes that is taking place in parallel to the IGF, Net Mondial and others, and then the floor. So who has any problem with extension 15 minutes that we lost in the beginning? Okay, I mean, but we extend till 10:45, huh? Okay. So first take a round from the floor, and then we go to the question about Net Mondial and related. We have many hands, Khalid, and the lady there, and the gentleman, and if there is something from the remote participation also. Okay, so would you really give the floor first to Khalid, because Khalid raised the flag first, and then I'll go to you, we'll take all the questions in one round, and then come back. Khalid, please.
Thank you, Ayman. Khalid Fattal, Multilingual Internet Group. First of all, I wanted to intervene earlier on about some comments that were being discussed, and then I'm so pleased that the opportunity to speak came after the intervention from Leonid. When we talk about national, regional, and global, I think we are failing, and I use the word failing, to recognize local challenges for each community. When you use the term national, in many cultures, the implication is government. Now, I'm a big believer in the multi-stakeholder model, but I also believe there's a role for government, but the role for government is not to be the initiator, or government agencies to be the initiator. And here what I'm seeing is we need at certain local, at certain regions in the world to move away from the term national, but perhaps use the word local. Because the minute you use the word national, it implies exactly what you, Ayman, asked Leonid earlier on, under which umbrella, which ministry. The truth of the matter here, it should not be under a governmental umbrella or a ministry. It should be an initiative. And relating this to the Arab IGF, with some of the challenges that I have observed over the years, and we always wanted to make sure it's critically, positively critically positioned, we ask how many from the Arab masses have participated in Arab IGF? When you look at the challenges of the Russian IGF and the Russian example and their challenges, and you have 500 participants across, you know what? I think that's a decent achievement. What numbers do we have within the Arab? And I think the challenge here is we're not taking it to the masses, and we're still making it too national.
What do you think the number is?
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe you can tell me.
The first year was 350, the second year was 800, and the first year was under the host was Kuwait Information and Society, which is civil society. The second year was Mr. Tab was representing the government, and when the government took the lead, 850 from the community plus 8,000 from 8 remote hubs in all governorates. So there is also a merit, and we thank Tabuz, by the way, for being here. Mr. Tabuz is one of the champions in Algeria who opened up the opportunity to the community massively. And this was unprecedented number. By the way, we cannot replicate the number anymore.
I think just to close the comment, and I want to make sure it's a positive, critical comment, is out of the 800, how many are continuously participating and adding value?
Okay, this is a question to Mr. Tabuz. We ask at the end, how can we see the future of the national?
No, not future. No. Sorry, Ayman. Sorry. No, of course. But I'll leave you with this thought. It's not the future. We're trying to find out in the 3 or 4 or how many years the Arab IGF has been functioning and the challenges we have from the region. How many are active as it stands so that we can devise a plan for the future? Not what the future is, because guess what? We've seen a lot of 5-year plans from the region, and many of them are always sidetracked.
Okay, thank you so
That's
much.
my last comment.
A very important point noted. We'll take a bit of it here and the other bit in the workshop 142 on Thursday, which is focusing on the Arab IGF emerging issues. Now, Mary, the chair of the African IGF.
Okay, apart from the African IGF, I convene the Nigeria IGF, NIGF. And for 3 years running, have been convening it. And we have a local multi-stakeholder management or local organizers. We have government playing good role. The government, the ministry itself, and two of its agencies. We have the civil society, we have the technical community. The .ng CCTLD is the current secretariat for the NIGF. And we have always made recommendations, and some of our recommendations have been taken up by the government. From my own region, that is Africa, you know, most of the working CCs are related to the government. Some are just pure government organization. Others are just coming up. So government plays a lot of role. So we cannot call it national. I don't know how we're going to call it local. But if we call it local, our own country is so big, we still want to go to the local side, like regions, sub-regions. Okay, so it is very difficult for us. So
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. So the last question from the gentleman over there, and then we go back to the panelists to comment on the three questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. My name is Chombe Baudouin. I come from Kinshasa, DR Congo. I enjoy Mary and Rida, also Makan. I think we start to stand up national IGF. I want just to say how to build house without foundation. I think we must start to stand up strongly national IGF. And after that, we'll go up to sub-regional, regional, and global level. That is very important because we start now to discuss in the country about IGF and to enjoy government, technical community, academic, non-confessional organization hall. That we do just that is our approach in multi-stakeholder order. You see, we start that, and if we take out that way, I think it will be difficult for us to stand national IGF. For me, the important thing is national IGF before that.
Thank you, Baudouin. So I like the word foundation. This is something that we will use when we refer to this sort of mechanisms within countries, avoiding now the word national or local, whatever. This kind of mechanism within countries is the foundation. Yes, it is, because it's an ecosystem, and the roots is in the community itself, which are the countries and regions. So any comments from the floor on the input from Khaled, Mary, and Baudouin? If not, Christine wants to comment.
Okay, I will quickly respond to Khaled, because I think there is a point he's making here, and I like that point. And I think there's a lot of similarity even with the IGF, the global IGF, not only, I mean, it's the same. You have so many participants that come to the annual meeting. And when you go to a specific country, a lot of them actually come from that country or from that region. Most of them may have not heard of the IGF before and may not participate afterwards. And I think here is the big challenge that we all have, and the Arab IGF, I do confirm we have this challenge, to have meaningful participation through the year, because the idea is actually to talk about public policies that are pertaining to internet governance, not only at the big event, but also nationally, on a national level through the year, and even regionally through the year. So you do have a point, and I think this is something that we need to carefully consider, what it is that would get people to come to the table and discuss. Is it why aren't they coming? Are they not seeing the benefit there? I don't know. So in Egypt, if I take an example from my very local place, we had very early on in the 90s discussions that were actually convened by the ministry, but were very multi-stakeholder in nature, because everyone, and they were not labeled IGF. There was no IGF at the time, but everyone was coming in just to discuss public policies that at the end ended up with splitting of ADSL, having broadband initiatives, doing big initiatives like the free internet. So it actually did an impact on the actual internet in the country. Now those people know nothing about the IGF and they're not interested to know. So it's about, you know, what is the stake? Thank you.
I'll take 30 seconds. First of all, thank you for acknowledging the point. Secondly, the challenge we have in the Arab region is because our public-private partnership is slim to none, and slim is out of town. This is where it actually doesn't work. Secondly, the other point here is, for serving the Arab region, I personally do not care. Some people might not like what I'm going to say. I don't care about promoting multi-stakeholder or multi-whatever-ism. What I think we need to make the issue is, how does it address the pain and the issues of the local citizen? Period. If it's connectivity, then you make that the topic. If it's access, you make that the topic. If it's policy, you make that the topic. Now, if it then happens to be under the umbrella of IGF, then IGF has actually acted as an enabler. By getting them engaged, now you're creating a multi-stakeholder process instead of preaching a religion. So this is one. Thank you.
Mirna?
Thank you. Mirma Barbar from UN ESCWA Beirut. I do second your point, your second point. Engaging people, engaging citizen in the process is very important. And I think capacity building, awareness sessions, pre-event days before the IGFs themselves could bring a lot to these citizens and final target groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from Mary?
I want to say that we discussed what is on the forerunner of our country. We don't do the global at our national level. So call it local or call it anything. And anything that is on the front burner, that's what we discuss. We look at the areas that the global level will discuss, but what will benefit us? What is there for us as Nigeria? And one of the things we did last was to do a training for our young people. We had a day before for the young people. They came, and they are looking forward for next year. So if we discuss local issues, people will get engaged. We got our people engaged.
Thank you. Just a small announcement, also adding to the input of my colleague Mirna, that the Arab IGF in its third round this year will have a pre-event targeting mainly capacity building of newcomers. And also let me reiterate that the first IGF in Kuwait had a special session for youth, a plenary session for youth engagement. So we are still in a nascent phase. We are evolving a little bit by bit, but we have this idea of engagement as part and parcel of our strategy, whether it is the new segments like youth or new regions like what the Algerians did, or newcomers in general. And we will move and then improve. The gentleman in the panel, there is one pressing question before we close regarding this other processes that are evolving in parallel to the IGF process. And this is again to the session. I'll come back to you, Faisal, please, because of the time, but please remind me. The idea of the IGF as a spin-off, the Tunis agenda, has been alive. It took shape, and we are here because of it is the ninth version, and it's successful. It is working, and it can be better. Okay, there is a new process that started recently, which is the Net Mondial. So I cannot really miss the chance of this panel and distinguished participants and guests to ask the question about this Net Mondial platform, which has not been spun off from Tunis agenda. And the Tunis agenda, as Wolfgang rightfully explained, is articulated by heads of states. And it took 4 years as a process. So just a question also for thought-provoking. Such a mechanism like Net Mondial, how much level of legitimacy does it have vis-a-vis the IGF itself? One being a child of a parent like a WISIS process with summit level legitimacy. And the new one is very important, very good example of multi-stakeholder innovation, but it was not spun off in the same way. What do you think about it in a nutshell? And the next question, let me put it now. and how can it have a channel to the destination, file destination, which is the CSTD General Assembly, for example, to give it more legitimacy, like the IGF, where it has this channel through the CSTD, ECOSOC, and General Assembly. So anyone is welcome to input without any order. Leonid raised his hands first. So please. And anyone, and Parliament.
I just wonder
Wolfgang.
if anyone is in this room were watching the last Net Mundial dash World Economic Forum session in Geneva. Just two. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Me counting third and Wolfgang fourth. So 4 people in this room were aware that there was an event in Geneva, although there were no forewarning for that, no information about that, and that was a kind of Net Mundial, post-Net Mundial event, which is pretty symbolic to me. You just mentioned, sir, that word legitimacy. I think that we should judge each and every event by its ultimate purpose. It seems to me that both Net Mundial and that Geneva event were pursuing that ultimate purpose of getting legitimate, whatever. Thank you. So this is bending and twisting with the nature of the processes initiated by the Geneva and Tunis meetings, and which is something different from what we are used to. And this creates an absolutely new closed environment in which what I called, once again, internet bureaucracy merged in ecstasy with the business bureaucracy and big businesses to discuss issues of mutual concern which have nothing to do with the nature and the spirit of the IGF. I'm sorry to be that radical and unorthodox, but we Russians, you know, we're bold and we love bold actions and bold expressions. Thank you.
Wolfgang.
Yeah, I think there's unfortunately, a lot of confusion about this and also mistrust and misunderstanding. I think the Net Mundial conference came out from a process which was triggered by the revelations of Edward Snowden and the growing mistrust, and parts of the community said we have to do something, and the result of this that we have to do something was the Net Mundial conference in Brazil, which was based on the understanding that all stakeholders have to do something together on equal footing. And the interesting element which was added by Net Mundial was that was a multi-stakeholder meeting which produced an outcome. This was different from the IGF because the IGF is a multi-stakeholder meeting so far with no outcome. But the main message in Sao Paulo was we have to strengthen the IGF. So the Net Mundial was never designed nor planned to be an alternative to the IGF. So it was probably we can get additional steam to make the IGF better so that the IGF can go the next step to become more stable, probably also a little bit more institutionalized, get more funding, get more secretarial support, get stronger and produces output. I think this is the main intention of the Sao Paulo conference in Net Mundial. So the question was then, how we can use the steam from Sao Paulo to push this forward. And I think this is here the first big step that we say, okay, we get some fresh blood. And fresh blood is inter alia, the World Economic Forum. If the World Economic Forum brings additional resources, additional ideas to the process, I think that's good. What Alan Marco said yesterday, so that the Minister Ivanovsky from Macedonia, where here are the finance ministers, where are the ministers for health, the ministers of education, because all they are relevant for the internet. And if the World Economic Forum can help to bring this here to this process, I think this is very welcome. we should be very clear. Davos is a two-stakeholder process. Big government meets big business. It's not a multi-stakeholder process. So traditional governmental meetings are one-stakeholder processes. So we should have this distinction in mind if we talk about the future of the multi-stakeholder IGF. So my proposal, and I think this is now going around here, is the destination for this Net Mundial initiative should be the next IGF in Brazil. So the slogan could be from Brazil to Brazil. It started in Sao Paulo. The next IGF will be in Brazil. There is no need to be in a hurry to produce results within 6 months as envisaged at the moment with the Net Mundial initiative. It needs more time. There is no need to rush, so that means we should discuss this with all stakeholders to make this additional initiative very useful. So additional steam is needed, additional support is needed for the IGF, but it would be, really a misunderstanding if we treat now the Net Mundial initiative and IGF as two different shoes walking in different directions. So this is one process, and the main process is the IGF. And the IGF, we know, needs the renewal. So that means if the renewal fails, then we can reconsider whether we have, based on the national and regional IGFs, an IGF, which is organized in a different way. Insofar, we have to go across the hurdle of the renewal of the IGF, and then we have a different situation, and this brings us in the year 2016. But it's still a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Parminder.
Yeah, since Wolfgang talked about how the Net Mundial Brazilian meeting came about, I cannot not say this, that I remain very surprised if I read President Dilma's speech in the UN and what kind of vision she threw and what kind of things needs to be done and how US and big corporate is doing what to the world. And then the world rallied behind her and gave her the leadership, and we had a Net Mundial which produced an outcome which is most celebrated by the same two actors, the US government and the big corporates, who were on the mat by Dilma's statement and Snowden's revelation. And that seems to me to be some kind of a problem, and what kind of capture took place at the Net Mundial. Now, that apart, the issue is, Brazil has a right to conduct a IG event. WEF has a right to conduct an IG event. Nobody's against it. Everybody has a right to conduct IG events. Now, Net Mundial WEF is not an event. The problem is to try to make it the process, the global multi-stakeholder process, which is more legitimate than the UN-based. WEF process is directly aimed at WSIS plus 10 review and the problems which US government and the corporates see in what could happen at the WSIS plus 10 review. Now that's exactly what it is about. When you try to place yourself as the process, now there are huge problems which we have. And how multi-stakeholderism becomes a fetish comes very clearly from what Wolfgang said. The things are rated, UN being one stakeholder is low quality, than WEF being two stakeholders. Now, that is not the kind of things we should be talking about. We are talking about public interest and coming from a southern civil society. If I distrust WEF, now that's in our roots. I can't go back to the community and say, no, I have joined the WEF to rule the world. I mean, that's not how things happen. WEF is that 0.001% against which there have been growing democratic movements. And I don't really, say that they don't have a right to do what they're doing. They should go ahead and do it. But trying to lead a global movement, a global governance system, is simply disgusting for me. That's the word I would use.
Any thoughts on this? But very quick, please, Reda.
Thank you, Chairman.
For transparency, after Reda, we have Makan, he wants to add something, Ahmad, and Khalid, who else? So as to close. You don't want? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that we should forget about any antagonism between Net Mundial and IGF. It has been clearly stated by all the leaders saying, it's not long enough. Okay. It has been clearly stated by all the leaders saying that we will strongly support the IGF. However, the issue of the status of the IGF, the issue of, let's say, the mandate of the IGF is still on the table, and no one clearly said that it is supporting or not the idea of having more power for the IGF and the decision making mandate. Now, let's look at the agenda of, let's say, 2014 and 2015 leading to the UN General Assembly. What are the coming events? We will have for sure IGF 2015 to talk about that, probably a second round of Net Mondial. But we have to remember that if this issue is meant to be brought on the table on the UN General Assembly, it has to be brought by the CSTD as a reporting agency to the UN General Assembly on the whole with this process. So let's see what's the intention of the CSTD to put in their report and in their set of proposals regarding having the IGF getting, let's say, more a deeper mandate in terms of decision making. Thank you.
Okay, Khaled, and then Makan.
I'll be very, very brief. First of all, Wolfgang, thank you very much. You described the process that led to Mondial very, very well, but let me just add a couple of other things. And I think this is where we go back to your point, Christine, earlier on, regarding the participation. Net Mondial did not happen by accident. Net Mondial did not happen because, it happened because the community pushed for it, and the community was me. Sorry for using the word me. If you recall, anybody who was at the ICANN meeting in Johannesburg, I think it was in South Africa, I can't remember, it was last year. Durban, thank you. I addressed the board and Fadi in the public forum, and up to that point, the NSA revelations were still not being public discussions. I challenged the board, and I challenged Fadi that it needs to be a public discussion, public debate, because trust was being dealt a cancer scare because of the Snowden revelation. What it tells us that, up to that point, it was the big white elephant in the middle of the room. We all came to Bali, and then everything was about the Snowden revelation. Why this is significant? It just shows you how the community participation, and I consider myself a member of the ICANN community, the community participation triggered this. And Bali, President Obama sent an ambassador to speak on his behalf about the Snowden revelation and his commitment to doing what is necessary. And I'm using the key words. And as a result, the Fadi and President Rousseff was the engagement to create Net Mondial. Now, Net Mondial outcome ensured that it becomes aligned with IGF. Nobody knew what the Net Mondial outcome was going to look like, and you would agree with that. And also the desire and the timing by the Department of Commerce to announce the moving from the single rule or the single management of the route and the IANA function to a multi-stakeholder was politically well-timed. Why this is relevant? It's all because the process could have gone in a totally different direction. And this is part of the weakness when we were renewing the IGF, we're not considering how to make it valuable. Because an extenuating circumstance, the Snowden revelation, changed the game and brought Net Mondial to being a decision-making process, and everybody became frantic. Now we're back to non-conclusive, non-decision making. And this is where I think we need to start looking at how to make IGF more relevant. And when we go to local should not emulate or copy and paste the global IGF. Okay. It should serve its own local communities. Okay. That's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Because of the time, Makan, do you have something or Khalas?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when we are talking about bringing Net Mondial in the process, I really believe that as IGF has a mandate from the head of state, with the paragraph 72 of the Tunis commitment, And also in the Tunis Commitment, paragraph 72, Roman A, it's asking the IGF to facilitate discourse between bodies dealing with different cross-cutting international public policies regarding the internet and discuss issues that do not fall within the scope of any existing body. So I think that Net Mondial should be brought in here. Thank you.
So I'd like to wrap up. There are still more questions than answers, but I think we have done a little bit of contribution to thought-provoking process regarding strategic key issues on the ecosystem of the internet governance at large. The internet governance ecosystem has at the heart of it the IGF and the IGFs and whatever is happening in the big picture. We try to just lay down some questions. We don't claim that we have all the answers, but generally the most important answer is the title of this workshop, The Future of the Global and Regional IGF. The future is hopefully very bright, and I think we are maturing, and the whole process and its custodians plus the community are learning, and things will evolve with all of us and with the input of all of the stakeholders. And I would like to thank all the panelists, Qusay, Leonid, Wolfgang, Makan, Parminder, Christine, and Reda. I'm sorry I didn't give the floor to all the people. Sorry, Faisal. And please forgive me if I've had more of your time than planned. I thank all the co-organizers. I thank all the participants. Wish you a great day, and to meet again in next events. And mark your calendar, Arab IGF next November, inshallah, in Beirut. Thank you.